Welcome to the Fashion and Color Show, where we have dynamic conversations with designers and creatives influencing fashion. This show was inspired by our book, Fashion and Color, Volume 1, that serves to preserve the history of Black designers A to Z. Let's get into the show. I am with designer extraordinaire Aaron Potts, the creative director of A Potts. I am so excited because I got into your story a lot in researching for this show.
Yes.
And learned so much about you. The fact that you are from Detroit.
Yes.
And that has had such a big influence on your work,
It
know,
has.
and that you are a Parsons graduate, which, you know, there's not a lot of us that have graduated from Parsons, and that you've worked for some of the most incredible designers in this industry, including Bakla Mishka. I believe you worked directly or interned directly with Donna Karan.
Yes.
At the Donna Karan label, is that right?
Yes, I did. I actually met Donna. She was my senior critic at Parsons.
Okay.
And that's how then she offered me a job as a paid intern. First with DKNY, and then I sort of transitioned over, and I was doing illustrations of jewelry for Donna Karan collection. So I got to be in her really genius sphere of artistic expression, and that was a real highlight, especially being so early on in my career.
I mean, that was amazing. So why don't we go back to Detroit?
Okay.
Because that's where you were born and raised.
Yes.
I know you had a very traditional upbringing.
I did.
And I read that you actually lost your parents.
Yes.
Really early on in life. How did that impact you?
Yeah, I lost my mom when when I was around 11. I had just turned 11 years old. And then my father passed away 5 years later. I was 16. And it was, I look back now and I actually wonder how I actually got through it. It was a really difficult situation, one right after the other. But I was very blessed that I was surrounded by really an amazing family. I had, my mother had 4 other sisters, and my father had a sister that was in Detroit. So I ended up actually having 5 new mothers.
Okay.
And they rallied behind me and just supported me in everything. And when I discovered fashion in high school, well, I had always been an artistic child. I always was drawing and painting and making sculptures and all of that. And then I also loved anything that was like red carpet, beauty pageants, award shows, anything with girls in sequin dresses, I was there. And so when I got to high school, I actually found fashion design and illustration. And that was where I was able to put the art with this sort of glamour quotient. And once I found it, my family was actually very supportive. You know, I come from a blue collar family, but being from Detroit, which is a very artistic city when you think of the auto industry and you obviously music and so many stars from Detroit. So there is this embrace of artistic expression. So when I decided that I wanted to do that as a career path, my family wholeheartedly was on board with me and they supported me. And I discovered fashion in the 9th grade. I was actually taking journalism, and I got so upset with my journalism teacher, who gave me a B+ when I knew I deserved an A.
Love it.
So I angrily asked to be released from her class. Okay. And the class that was open was fashion illustration.
Wow. And I remember there was a teacher.
Yes.
In your illustration class that
yes.
really became almost like a surrogate mother.
She really did. Her name is Oni Akila. And she became this like a mother figure, a mentor, a counselor, a confidant. She really became kind of the center of my world.
Wow.
at high school. And so I'm so grateful for her. Once I decided that fashion was my path, and I realized that early on, in the 9th grade, Once I realized that, she completely got in my corner. And from ninth grade on, our goal was that we needed to get me into Parsons.
Wow.
Yes.
And why Parsons?
So Parsons, because of the legacy of the designers that have been there, everyone from, you know, Donna Karan, Marc Jacobs, Tracy Reese, Isaac Mizrahi, like all of the great, most of the great American designers actually went to Parsons. So it was sort of a no-brainer for her to guide me there. Now, I will say now as a professional looking back, I have worked with some amazing people from amazing schools that aren't Parsons, but at that moment, it was the school to be at. Yes.
I mean, and you also needed a vision, right? You needed
Yes.
to know where you were going.
Exactly.
So I won't hold that
Exactly.
against you as a proud FIT
Yes.
alumni.
Yes. Yes. And I've actually been a professor at FIT.
You have?
Yes.
Oh, I really, really, really love that school.
Yes.
And then you were very independent at a very young age. I know your father was a carpenter, so
Yes.
he really raised you old school.
Oh, wow. Yes.
I know that when you were, I think you were driving at 11. Like,
Yes.
how do you think that kind of impact your life?
You know, my dad basically taught me so many things about independence early on because he wanted me to be an independent. He always told me he wanted me to be independent, and my only job in his eyes was getting good grades in school. So those were the two things he wanted for me. So, you know, my dad was 53 when they had me. So by the time I was like 9 years old, my dad had retired. We spent all of our summers and weekends fishing in Canada and on every fish bank and in our motorhome RV. And like that was my life as a kid. And doing that, that was how he actually taught me how to drive. We would be in the back roads of, I particularly remember being in Florida, back in some back swamp fishing somewhere. And he was like, I want you to get behind the wheel.
Wow.
And that was the first time he ever taught me how to drive. And then I can say this now, as illegally driving as a child. He would pick me up from I would go to my grandmother's house after school.
Right.
I'm in like 6th grade, 7th grade. He would pick me up from my grandmother's house at 8 o'clock at night. And he was exhausted, wiped out from his carpentry work. And he's like, okay, get us home. And I was driving on the freeway. Yes, at 11 years old. Yes.
Wow, wow,
Yes.
wow. When you look at kind of that experience and where you are now as a designer,
Yes.
like what type of an impact did that moment in life have on you?
Well, you know, the biggest impact that I would say is having that old school upbringing. It really taught me a lot about just less about fashion specifically and just more about being a responsible, independent, helpful person.
Yeah.
I also grew up in the church, so that also was a huge impact on me and how I viewed relationships with people and community and just being helpful and all of that. And in terms of fashion, what I would say, because my dad was such a blue collar guy, I spent all my time in Montgomery Ward's, Sears, Kmart, in the outdoor section, and in the section where you buy all the like workwear and the Carhartt and all the Dickies and all of those kinds of brands. And those brands, because that was what my dad wore, and it imprinted in my brain.
Wow.
And to this day, I use so much of that as a reference because I feel like as much as I love the glamour of fashion, it still has to be practical and it has to be useful. And so I use those brands as a way, that look, that very blue collar workwear, over coveralls and all of that as a way to ground what I do in reality of how we actually have to use clothes.
Right, because I know you use a lot of cotton.
Yes,
A lot of
I
cotton in
do.
your collection.
I use a lot of cotton. I love this idea of taking almost simple things, simple, practical, useful things, and elevating them to on this grander scale. And that's why I do use a lot of cotton. I think my last spring collection, I would easily say 80% of it was cotton.
Wow.
Yeah.
Your experience at Parsons, I am assuming you were one of few
Yes.
people of color
Yes.
at Parsons. How did, like, what were some of the lessons that you got from going to such a prestigious fashion design school in particular?
You know, I will say this. So I came up, and this is probably a controversial thing, but I think we have to kind of speak these truths.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I came up in the 90s, and in the 90s, that was the era of, so we had Tracy.
Yep.
We then
Tracy Reese.
we had Tracy Reese, who is one
Was
of
still killing it,
still
by the
killing
way,
it
with her new line.
and she's now, I count her as a friend. She's someone that I looked up to, and now she's a friend, which it like blows my mind. Same thing with Byron Lars. Byron came along while I was in Parsons.
Another brilliant designer.
Brilliant mind.
Yep.
And so we had Byron, we had Tracy, and that was also sort of right at the beginning. By the time I graduated from Parsons in 94, that was when things started to shift. That was when we had the one black model rule. We had the situation where a lot of people don't realize this. We knew that there was this whole thing happening on the runways, this sort of, one black model on a runway or no black model on the runway. We knew that was a very visual thing. What a lot of the public didn't realize is that same thing was happening in design rooms. So there were design rooms where you were they had a slot for one black person. And that made it really, really tough. And then it shifted from just that to you had to have a European pedigree. So you had to have gone to one of the British schools, or you had to have gone to a school in Antwerp, or so those were kind of code for, we are going to keep you out.
Yeah.
And that is exactly what they did.
And one of the other things that a lot of people don't realize is that behind a lot of our great American designers is a black person.
Yes, absolutely.
There was a black person behind the scenes who was designing the product.
Yes.
Who was running the design business.
Yes.
But they weren't the face.
They weren't the
brand.
face.
Even when I looked at that documentary on Halston.
Yes.
There was a lot of things left out.
Yes, absolutely.
Of that documentary. And so that has been a real issue in fashion for a long time.
It has. And part of what happens with that, because it happened in the design room, and I can say that because I was on the receiving end of that. I literally remember people giving jobs to people who were from Europe because they had a specific accent, or because they dressed a certain way, or not even looking at the work.
Yeah.
And but the problem is that it wasn't just the design rooms. It was the casting offices. It was the editorial staffs. All of this was happening. So we had a drought of black talent for a good decade. Now, we did have our Edwards and Seals and Max Wilsons, and we had those people in those houses, doing brilliant work. Yeah. But it made it impossible for other people to flourish in the industry. I was very lucky. I was hired at Emmanuel and Garrow, his American diffusion line, right out of Parsons. And I ended up working with that team over the years, from Emmanuel to Anne Klein to when they launched their own brand. I totaled it up, and I actually worked with that team mostly freelance at the end, but in the beginning full time. But it was a total of over 20 years.
Wow.
And I think that that is what has, two things have been, I'd say, the thing that has let me have such a long career. It's good relationships,
Yep.
building good relationships with people. And I'm a fashion illustrator. So that had been sort of a calling card for me, that not everyone else had.
So you know that I think your illustration should be artwork that you sell, right?
Yes.
Like, honestly, I want a custom illustration that I will purchase
Yes,
from you
yes.
because your illustrations are absolutely stunning.
Thank you
I
so
mean, they should be
much.
artwork.
Thank you.
That's like a whole nother revenue
I don't
stream.
know if you knew this. I actually used to have a greeting card company.
Did you?
I had a
I
greeting
did
card
not know
company,
that.
and on my greeting cards, I did all the original fashion illustrations that would sort of speak to Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's or whatever the holiday was, Valentine's Day. And I was selling the cards to Patricia Field, to Jeffries when they
Oh,
were in
wow.
business, some specialties, some high-end specialty stores, and then I had to get back in the rag trade.
Okay, so let's talk about. So you worked for a while for many different brands.
Yes.
Like so many different brands on
Yes.
Seventh Avenue. And then you decide to start your own line. Was that
Yes.
in 2018?
So the idea popped in my head in 2018, and we
Okay.
launched. It was me. I launched in spring of 2019. I think
Okay.
it was.
Okay.
Yes, and that was I was working for another brand, which
Okay.
will. I certain brands that I worked for, I will say their names. Certain other names I don't say because I
Yeah.
don't even want to give them any
Yeah.
energy. And I was working for this one brand, and it was a hellish job. It was everything awful about the fashion industry that people sort of make fun of.
Yeah.
And every stereotype, And the sad part was that I had moved to the West Coast to do this job. So it was a miserable job. And then I got laid off after about 6 months after I had moved to California. And even though I hated the job, I was used to working.
Right.
So I did not like being out of a job.
Right.
And I came back to New York, and I was glad to be free of those people, but I was not glad to be without a job.
Right.
But I was at a bit of a crossroads, and I had to figure out, what was I going to do? Did I want to continue down that path of working for other people, of making other people's visions come to life? And I had done that for so many people, made so many people a ton of
I
money.
mean, that is the story of so many Black designers.
Ton of money. And what I did, instead of just jumping into something, I started doing meditation, going to yoga, going to church. I started really like engaging my inner self.
Going inside.
Yep.
Yeah.
And that part of that was also, I started making clothes for myself. And I hadn't done patterns and sewing and stuff. I had sample rooms,
Right.
And I excuse me, I decided, okay, I'm going to make what I don't see in the store that I want myself. So I wanted like a pair of my oversized Patrick Kelly inspired overalls. I wanted like big sloppy jumpsuits that I could, throw something over, wear with sneakers, wear with boots. And I started making these things, and people started asking me where I got them. And then one day I was standing in front, and I've told this story so many times, but it's so it really was a light bulb moment for me. I was standing in front of my closet, and I looked, and I was looking in the middle sort of third of the closet, and it was all the stuff that I had made for myself, plus like a dashiki I bought at the flea market, and something else. But it was mainly these things I had made for myself. The third that was on the right and the third that was on the left, I never touched.
Wow.
And I said to myself, you need to be making the stuff that's in the middle third of the closet. And that was my light bulb moment. And so I started putting it pen to paper and trying to figure out what it was and really what I wanted to say. And so I found a salesperson and a amazing PR agency, and they started helping me put my story out into the world.
I mean,
Yeah.
your clothes, which, by the way, I am wearing APOTs today. You know, they really, it's fun. It makes me feel really flirty. I feel really confident in your clothes.
Yes.
I wore a dress from you to the White House.
Yes.
It was my one and only time I've been invited to the White House. I'm going to say my first time.
Yes.
I will be coming back.
Yes.
And I wore this dress and I'm walking in and I have to tell you, like, 3 of the security guards stopped me. And and was like, you look so beautiful. And one of them said, look, I've seen a lot of people here tonight. You're the best dressed.
Oh, that is so wonderful.
Like, these are like unsolicited
Yes.
comments from these guards
Yes.
that are at the event. Everyone commented on that dress.
Yes.
And this is actually the style of the dress
Yes.
that I wore. So it's very similar with the flounce at the bottom.
Yes.
Except it was a print.
Yes.
So, and then you just showed.
I just showed.
How was that?
That was, can I tell you, it has been, I'm just going to jump forward for one thing to say this. People ask me, what's the future of fashion, right? One of the things I believe is the brilliance of Black women is not just the future of fashion, but it really, to me, is the future of the world. There's a lot of things happening that Black women right now at this moment are trying to work some stuff out.
Right.
And and I come from I had a wonderful dad, but my family is really a matriarchal family.
Okay.
So I have a love and an affinity, and I've known this brilliance of Black women my entire life. So to work with you and to see what you've created talking on a big scale, it feels hopeful to me, and it feels like home to me. So I really want to thank you for that. And doing that show at the Apollo Theater, I actually still get chills. It makes my hand shake a little.
Wow.
Because when I was at Parsons, and even after Parsons, I went to the Apollo Theater all the time.
Wow.
I was going to watch Showtime at the Apollo, Uptown, Apollo Comedy Hour. They were taping all these different things, and we had a friend that worked in security.
Okay.
So we would get in. We got the hookup, and so to be in the audience and see these amazing people is one thing, but to then take my work to this building that is not only a cornerstone of Black culture, it is a cornerstone of American culture and entertainment, international entertainment. And for me to show my clothes on that stage and get to rub the tree of hope, and it was, I always talk about these bucket list items that I didn't realize were on my bucket list, and that was one of them.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That is incredible. It was so great. Like,
it was a great show.
The response from your collection, which I knew about your collection, but it was Allison from our team that was like, you really have to check out Aaron Potts. And I looked at your website and I'm like, why have we not worked with him? Why have we not shown his collection? What are we doing?
Yes.
And I was like, check with him, see if he can show his collection.
Yes.
And, it was such a treat for us to be able to show your collection on the HFR stage.
Yes. It was really, it was such a great night. We had a wonderful cast of kids that showed the clothes, and your whole team, and just being there and getting to meet people that I'd never met June Ambrose before, and I finally got to meet her, and just connecting with, people that I've built great relationships, Jason Rimbert, who I adore, and like
he's on the show too.
Yes, and all of these people in one place,
Yes,
supporting one another, like that is, and like, yeah, even people that showed with me, friends, and
when I saw Memzor
yes,
Kamaraki,
yes,
who I just absolutely adore.
yes,
And I saw him backstage with you working with the styling. I was like, of course, Memzor would be here working with Aaron.
Yes, he is we have, you know how you meet people and you just automatically have a connection with them. It was such a seamless way for us to work together, to start working together. It just was like we worked together all the time.
And he's just so brilliant.
Yes.
He really is so brilliant.
And he's a truth teller.
He's a truth teller. I have found that most Black folks in fashion are truth tellers, especially if they want you to be the best.
Exactly.
Like if they want you to be the best, they are not holding back.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing is that I told him this recently. Like, I think of my relationships with people as, whether it's working with Memsor, whether it's working with young models, with the beauty teams, people will say, "Oh, this was so beautiful. You did such a great job." And the first thing that I do, because I am such a believer in community and really working together, this is a joint effort. It is like a puzzle piece. It takes your piece of the puzzle, my piece of the puzzle, her piece of the puzzle. We put it together, and that's how you make something that's magic. This whole thing of like, I think it's so old-fashioned, this idea of a designer being this sort of like dictator person, and everyone is flurrying around them and that sort of thing. That's not my thing at all. So I love real community efforts, creative collaboration, putting everything together and having a good time while we're doing it.
Absolutely. Because if you're not having fun,
what are you doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing? And also, I think what happens is the energy that you have in when we're developing and working and behind the scenes and putting it together. I truly believe that energy transfers through every place that we sort of move this collection along, to the point that it's on a selling floor. I believe
to the point that it's on a body.
That it's on a body. I think people can pick up on that energy. So I don't want to, imbue my clothes with yelling and screaming and ego and cussing and fighting, and I don't want that. So we have a good time and we enjoy each other, and we try to really heighten everybody's talents and put them together.
I love that. When you think about where you're headed, what do you want for the APOTS brand?
It's so interesting. Because I do believe in being intentional. So I do want APOTS to be, I call it the go-to brand for creative professionals. That's how I see it. So we have been so lucky that we have, people, everyone from Questlove to Queen Latifah to Sierra to Robin Thede and Amy Sherald. This vast array of people who create different things and in different mediums, authors, and Angela Davis has worn APOTS. So, the fact that we have been able to reach them, it has been such a, it's helped prove to me that where I was headed is going in the right direction, because we're actually reaching the types of people that I want to reach. So, it's people of diverse races, sizes, ages. But the thing that connects all of these people is that they have creative souls. And that's what I want APOTS to represent. And to do that, if that means I'm a, yeah, I'd love to have a $10 million business.
Right.
I'd love to have a $50 million business. But the end goal is less about the amount of money that we're making, as long as we can make enough money that we all can get paid well, live well, have enough to keep everything moving and growing. But the goal is actually to feed the lives of people who create, because the people who create art are the people who create culture.
Absolutely.
And culture right now is the most important thing
Absolutely.
in this world of social media and people needing to find a way to connect. And right now it's through the internet.
It's through the internet. Even though I feel like we're doing more in-person moments.
Yes.
Where can people shop your collection?
So the collection is mainly shoppable at Shopbop. So that they right now are our biggest resource to sell the clothes. And we actually just did our first e-com shoot 2 days ago.
Okay.
So we actually will be launching e-com for holiday selling.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's and really, and I'll say this, I love our retail partners, but I really do want to make e-com an important part of my business, because that way I can really talk directly with the consumer.
And it also helps the retailer too.
Yes.
Right? Because you're able to then really communicate to them what your customers
Exactly.
want. I love that.
Exactly.
Aaron, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Can you let our viewers know and our listeners know where they can find you?
Yes. So you can find me on the internet at www.apotscollection.com.
And that's APOTTS.
Collection, singular.
Okay, got it.
No S on collection. apotscollection.com. And on Instagram, we're at ____pots. If you put in apots, it's usually the first one. Yeah. So it'll pop up. But Instagram has become like probably the most important tool of communication for us. But that's apots on Instagram, yes.
Well, I am so excited to have you here. Before you leave, I'm going to gift you with one of these fashion and color books.
I will
you will
take
make
it.
sure you have one of those.
Yes.
But this was so great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you.